In 1776, Thomas Jefferson penned a document that would change the world as it was known then and precipitated a change and a new world that we are still living in today. In 1776 was when Thomas Jefferson had the audacity to pen a document called the Declaration of Independence, when a little ragtag group of colonies decided that they were going to rebel against the most powerful military force in the history of the world. Sorry, my polyphasic sleeping got a tiny bit out of phase and I overslept just a tad. But I remain Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and we're here to talk today about Thomas Jefferson and a new Reformation. That's right, Thomas Jefferson and a new Reformation. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and that's what we want to talk about today. That's what we want to take a look at today. That's what we want to discuss today. Thomas Jefferson and a new Reformation. Of course, the first Reformation was about a couple hundred years. Well, it was in the late what was it, the 16th century? But we're talking about the Reformation that Jefferson started today, or started when he decided to write the Declaration of Independence. And if you think about the Declaration of Independence and what he said and who he said it to, it's quite remarkable. And Jefferson decided, really, he decided with many of his fellows, but he was the one that put pen to paper that stated that the United States was going to rebel against the great nation of Britain. Militarily impossible, politically audacious, really a stupid, crazy thing to do, to think that they could ever pull it off. But he was a proponent of democracy. He was a proponent of individual rights. And he motivated American colonists, or at least helped motivate, to break from Great Britain, form a new nation, which really was tremendously audacious. But it wasn't but about 20 some odd years later where Jefferson, his mind obviously still on freedom, his mind obviously still on throwing off bondage, his mind obviously still on individual rights, and his mind obviously still on felling yet a greater oppressor, he wrote something that came to be known as the Jefferson Bible. Wasn't really the Jefferson Bible. What it was something that he called the Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. And he completed it about, right after 1800. And he basically took out a razor and cut out lots and lots of sections of the New Testament. And it's been wrongly called the Jefferson Bible. That's not really what it was. But it was Jefferson having the audacity first to have taken on Great Britain. Now he was taking on the very God of the New Testament. And this is a picture of the cover of the book, written in the very hand of Jefferson himself. The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth, extracted textually from the Gospels in Greek, Latin, French, and English, scanned by the Smithsonian. Title page of the original copy of the Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. So there's really no Jefferson Bible. It's, I love this guy. Jefferson taking a razor to the New Testament and cutting out the stuff that he cut out the stuff that he thought was worthy and left the rest of it behind. And of course, we know someone else. We both know someone else that has done something rather similar. And what was Jefferson's motivation? Well, in part, Jefferson said that the greatest of all reformers of the depraved religion of his own country, and he's talking about Judaism, the great Abrahamic faith, along with Islam, and of course, Christianity would come to be. But Jefferson says that he was the greatest reformer of the depraved religion of his own country, i.e. Judaism, and that abstracting from what is really his, he said, talking about the New Testament, abstracting what is really his from the rubbish in which it was buried, he's talking about the Bible. Trying to pull, and specifically he's talking about the New Testament, trying to pull the rubbish, trying to pull from the rubbish in which it's buried the real words of the Christ is really not that hard, says Jefferson. Jefferson said it's easily distinguished by its luster from the dross of his biographers, and is separable from that as the diamond from the dunghill. So Jefferson took his razor, his penknife, really to the New Testament and began to abstract and extract from the depraved religion and the Reformation thereof, of Judaism, and of what up until his time was the New Testament, same one you and I read, King James Version, bless God. He cut out what he thought was the diamonds, and he left the dung. And what he was left with was the outlines of a system of the most sublime morality which has ever fallen from the lips of man. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Within the New Testament is contained the most sublime morality which has ever fallen from the lips of a man, those being the teachings of the Christ, and yet it must be abstracted, it must be extracted from a mass of dung. The diamonds must be pulled from the dung. And of the New Testament, Jefferson also said, there is internal evidence, and he means right within the New Testament itself. There's internal evidence that parts of the New Testament proceeded from an extraordinary man, and that there's other parts that are the fabric of very inferior minds. And it's easy to separate those parts as to pick out diamonds from dunghills. And he said that the Apostle Paul was the first great corrupter of the doctrines of Christ. It doesn't take much extrapolation. It doesn't take much abstracting to realize that while Jefferson considered the Christ of the most sublime morality, he also considered the Apostle Paul to be of very inferior mind. This dude that had the audacity to sit down and pen a tome that told the greatest military power in the world, we're leaving, and if you don't like it, you know where we are. And then to stand and fight through and back up his words, and to fight it through to victory in the face of impossible odds, that's impressive. And yet, he wasn't satisfied with overthrowing the greatest political power in the history of the world. He went on again to identify an even greater oppressor, to identify an even greater oppression, to identify even greater injustice, and to identify a power that was not only oppressing men in this life, but sought to oppress them in the next. and he didn't stand idly by. He did something about it. He took on the greatest power in the history of the world, the Roman religion, and both its Roman Catholic and its Roman Protestant versions. And in 1800, he was saying this stuff in 1800. Trust me, it's not that comfortable to say it in 2018. Can you imagine saying the same things that I'm saying in the 1800s? Was Thomas Jefferson a perfect man? No, he wasn't. Was Thomas Jefferson a man? Yes, he was. Say what you will about Jefferson, but he understood oppression. He knew what it was. He felt it. He tasted it. He understood it. Say what you will about Jefferson, but he understood what bondage was. He saw it, lived it, bore it. But Jefferson also knew what integrity was and bravery was. And he walked his talk. He lived his convictions. And he stepped up with a new Reformation. And, you know, there's a lot of people that thought, man, why are you rocking the boat? Yeah, Jefferson isn't the greatest, or Britain's not the greatest. We don't exactly love the king, but we got a great standard of life. The king loves us. He really does. The king protects us. If we just obey the king, everything will be fine. We can still grow our crops. We can still live in our houses. We can still have sex with our wives and our husbands, and everything will be fine. So what if we're not free? Well, Jeff, don't you know that Christianity's worked pretty good? It may not be perfect, but hey, you know what? Maybe the Lord is a murderer. Maybe the Lord is a liar. Maybe he is jealous. Maybe he is wrathful. Maybe he is vengeful. But you know what? If you know what, all we have to do is just go to church every now and then and say a few Hail Marys or a few praise Jesuses, and we can work our work, and we can eat our food, and we can have sex with our spouses, and it's really not that bad. Yeah, we live in a cage, but it's a pretty nice cage. But that wasn't good enough for Thomas Jefferson. He said, nope, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And he said, nope, just like he thumbed his nose in the face of King George, he thumbed his nose in the face of King James, and he thumbed his nose in the face of Yahweh. And he laid us a path for a new Reformation, but the question is, do we have the guts? Do we still have the guts that Thomas Jefferson and his compatriots had in 1776? Do we still have the integrity and the guts and the moral indignation to fight against an oppressor even greater than Great Britain? Do we still have the guts and the tenacity and the integrity and the mettle to fight against an ogre and an oppressor even greater than an earthly king? You know, they were fighting against taxation without representation. And guess what? We've discovered that taxation with representation ain't that much better. And some of us have decided that it is time for a new Reformation. And we will step forward and say, no, we're not going along with the status quo. No, we're not going along with the dominant paradigm. No, we're not going to be content in our cages. We're going to start rattling them. Thomas Jefferson, not perfect, but he understood what oppression was. Thomas Jefferson, not perfect, but he understood what bondage was. And he understood what bravery was. And he understood the value of standing up and fighting. He understood that freedom wasn't free. And he understood and said that now and again, revolution is a good thing. It's time, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for a new reformation. It's time for us to say the Bible has some diamond, but it's got a whole lot more dung. It's time for us to say, yeah, things aren't that bad, but the God of the Bible is an oppressor, is an ogre, and he's been keeping us down too long. It's time to really live free and to reach for that freedom that is ours. And now that we have said no to a political oppressor, it's time to say no to an oppressor that seeks to control not just this life, but the next. It's time to listen again to the words of Thomas Jefferson, and it's time to take him up on his encouragement that now and again a little revolution is a good thing. It's time to grab your torches. It's time to grab your pitchforks. It's time to grab your clubs and your staves and your kitchen knives. Meet me at the corner. We're going to march on the castle of Christianity. And if they won't lower the drawbridge, we'll swim the moat. But those walls are coming down. They said the Americans couldn't beat Great Britain. They say we can't win against the rat bastard, the Lord Yahweh, the God of the Bible. But guess what? We come from people that won unwinnable battles. We come from people that beat unbeatable enemies. We come from people that fell unbeatable foes. All of us, white, black, red, yellow, we all came from peoples that have successfully overthrown enemies and defeated oppression. And guess what? The Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah, Marduk, rat bastard, he is just another oppressor. And he's the next one to fall. The British aren't coming, but the rat bastard is, and he's already here. One, if by land, two, if by sea. It's time to fight the rat bastard, and I hope that you'll join me. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and it's time for we the people to say that we're tired of the dung. We want the diamonds that are ours, and we will not be silent anymore. Lock and load. Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes. And don't tread on me. We're the Gospel Truth Army. Get ready. Here we come.